1908. 5 young men captured in the breathless quiet of a photographer's studio, their images sealed in silver and glass. For 65 years they remained silent witnesses. Then, in a room humming with modern technology, their silence would be broken, stunning a team of assembled experts. It began, as such mysteries often do, with a single fragile artifact. An old wedding photograph, brittle with age, its corners warped by decades spent in a dusty attic. When a digital copy was finally brought into the light, its enlargement promised to unlock a secret that had haunted a village and its descendants for generations. Felix Boschi, a historian with the soul of a detective, watched the monitor intently. "Can we increase the contrast?" he asked, his voice taut with anticipation. A technician, with a practiced shrug, began to manipulate the digital sliders. Bands of light and shadow flickered across the screen, slowly, painstakingly, coaxing clarity from the chemical haze. The original print, long faded and obscured by its clouded glass frame, had never before been subjected to such a high-resolution analysis. One by one, the faces of the 5 men sharpened, emerging from the silver halide mist of the past. The digital lens slid slowly across the row, coming to rest on the second man from the left. His gaze was not on the bride, but fixed on some unseen point beyond the frame. In his eyes, a profound, hidden sorrow. The studio was shrouded in a tense silence, broken only by the low hum of the scanner. The director, ever in search of a sensation, had insisted they attempt the technical enhancement live on air. The producers, having seen only a low-resolution version, were confident the broadcast would be a triumph. But every expert in the room understood the stakes. One clumsy move, one digital artifact too many, and the chance to unravel the legend of St. Helena could be lost forever. "Hold the zoom there," Felix requested, his voice barely a whisper. "On the second man." The technician's cursor froze. On the monitor, the man's face filled the screen. Angular cheekbones, lips pressed into a firm line. Under the unblinking eye of the scanner, his expression revealed a complex mixture of longing and resignation, a quiet authenticity that made the forced smiles of the others seem hollow. A cold certainty grew in Felix's chest. This was him. This was the man whispered about in the legend for decades, the one who lost his true love, whose broken heart became the source of a grief passed from one generation to the next. Then Felix's finger rose, pointing to another part of the image, to the 4th woman from the right. The photograph had given up one ghost, but the true story was never about a single person. It is a testament to the silent power of a captured moment, an instant of truth, waiting patiently for the right eyes to see it and to finally understand. His voice was steady, a stark contrast to the tension coiling in the room. "We need a clear view of her hands," he commanded. A technician murmured an incantation of technical jargon, his fingers dancing across a console, adjusting the focus. On the screen, the image sharpened. At first, there was only a subtle tremor in her interlaced fingers, a ghost of motion captured in silver nitrate. But then, as the exposure was meticulously calibrated, a telltale glint of metal appeared near the base of her thumb. A profound stillness descended upon the room. "Stop," breathed Felix. He leaned forward, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. There, unmistakable even through the grain of the century-old paper, was the ring. It was gold, bearing an engraved crest. Under the spectral glow of the ultraviolet lamp, the initials AM were faintly yet undeniably discernible. Around him, a low murmur erupted among the assembled experts, the sudden collective intake of breath as the full weight of the discovery settled. This was no mere forgotten wedding band. This was the physical proof of a local legend, a whispered story that had haunted the region for generations, but had always remained.
Wait, this is not the full story. The most important part is just beginning, and it changes everything we thought we knew.
Beyond the grasp of evidence. A secret exchange made long before any public ceremony, hidden in plain sight, its truth guarded by the silent pact of the dead. Felix offered no reply. The image was too eloquent, too devastating in its silent proclamation. The entire studio held its breath, as if the very air had been stolen. This was more than a detail preserved in a group portrait. This was an incontrovertible truth, unearthed after 65 years of slumber. Before another word could be spoken, the voice of the on-air host crackled through the speakers, electric with disbelief and excitement. "We are interrupting this broadcast. We may have just solved a century-old family feud live on air. Stay with us." In thee, truth now etched so clearly onto the face of the second man in the photograph. It was a secret 5 men had carried to their graves, a story that only a group portrait could ever tell, a revelation that continues to confound experts more than 10 years after the shutter first clicked. The photograph's journey into the light had been one of pure chance. It was found at an estate sale, tucked away inside a plain, unmarked cardboard box. A junk dealer, struck by its somber composition and the date 1908 scrawled on the back, traced its origins to the small town of Sveta Elena. He sent it to the producers of a show dedicated to reuniting lost lovers with a simple handwritten note. "Perhaps you can find the truth. These faces never spoke." A month later, Felix was summoned to the show's cluttered green room. He had been invited as a guest expert for a special episode titled Unsolved Romances. He was still signing copies of his latest book, paying little attention, when a producer slid a folder across the table. Inside was the photograph. 5 men, captured in a moment of rigid, uncomfortable poise. But it was the composition, the specific, deliberate arrangement of hands and gazes that sent a chilling frisson of recognition down his spine. It was a silent language, a carefully constructed tableau, and he was, perhaps, the only person left alive who knew how to read it. For years of mysterious deaths and a betrayal that was said to have unraveled a day of opulent celebration, his heart had always tightened at the mention of it. He had even fashioned a minor character in a forgotten novel based on the so-called loser of this fabled love triangle, dismissing the legend itself as little more than provincial melodrama. It was all an impossible coincidence, right down to the haunted gaze he had once described in his fictional hero, a man he now knew was based on a ghost of flesh and blood. But now, staring at the actual photograph, the myth felt terrifyingly real. Behind the scenes, long after the film shoot had wrapped, Felix found himself returning to the image again and again. Each viewing revealed a new, unsettling detail. The way the second man's gaze was artfully directed away from the lens, away from everyone. The almost imperceptible tension in the hands of the fourth woman, her fingers coiled as if bracing for an impact. Unable to release the mystery, he leveraged his connections, arranging a 48-hour window with the studio's conservators to have the photograph scanned, an unusual risk for a writer far more comfortable with fiction than with fact. In St. Helena, the legend of the group photograph was as immutable as the salt-laced wind that scoured the cliffs. For generations, residents had passed down the same solemn story, a narrative everyone seemed to know, though few could agree on its precise details. It was always about 5 men who posed for a camera on the day of a double wedding, 5 childhood friends bound by loyalty, ambition, and the unbreakable oaths of youth. The most common version of the tale began in the lush summer of 1908, when the Ruera estate was to host an event that would bind 2 families forever. The celebration was lavish, a spectacle of white gardenias and imported champagne, an affair designed to herald an era of hope after a season of loss. On that day, the 5 men and their intended brides stood before the camera's unblinking eye. At the center of it all, everyone believed, was a single couple. Andamunitis, the second man from the left, the son of a humble shipwright, and Inzvalera, a woman whose reputation for wit and beauty...
Stay with me, because what comes next has been hidden for a very long time, and only a few people know the truth behind it.
...was rivaled only by the modesty of her origins. But their marriage was never to be. The story insists that Julie Unroa, the heir to the estate and the 4th man in the line, had intervened in the final weeks before the ceremony. Charming, wealthy, and accustomed to victory, Julie Unroa had turned his attention to Inzvalera, and she, despite her long-standing affection for Andamunitis, accepted his courtship, succumbing to the allure of status, to family pressure, or to some deeper desire no one could ever confirm. On the morning of the wedding, the 5 men posed for the now famous group photograph. But whispers were already drifting through the manicured gardens. Some said the heartbreak in Andamunitis' eyes was a visible wound. Others claimed the 4th woman's trembling hands betrayed a profound guilt. But on one point, all accounts converged. The chilling a nitrate, a tableau of forced smiles and hidden sorrows, freezing forever the instant before the gilded facade of their world came crashing down. It is an image that does not simply document the past, it holds it hostage, preserving the silent, terrible prelude to a tragedy that would echo for a century. It was a moment frozen in silver nitrate, a tableau of youthful promise captured under a summer sun. But only hours after the camera's shutter fell, the idyllic scene would be shattered. In the fragrant twilight of the Rivera estate, Anda was found not in celebration, but bleeding out amongst the thorns of the rose garden, fatally wounded. In the ensuing chaos, 2 of his friends, central figures in that sun-drenched photograph, simply vanished from the town of Santa Elena. Whispers clung in of blood stark against the white cuff of his wedding shirt. Others painted a different picture, a man broken, locked away in his father's study, a prisoner of a silence so profound it was its own confession. For years, the group photograph held its silent vigil in the Rivera parlor. It became a local relic, a monument to a joy so bright it had to cast a shadow of suspicion. Parents would point to the smiling faces, weaving a cautionary tale for their children, a sermon on the corrosive power of ambition, of jealousy, of pride. This was the official narrative, the one Felix had always inherited. It was a story polished by time, clean, tragic, and seemingly unassailable. But legends are never monolithic. Even as the accepted history became almost scripture in Santa Elena, cracks appeared beneath its smooth surface. The photograph ceased to be a memory, it became a canvas for a generation of speculation. Over the years, competing versions of the tragedy multiplied, each armed with its own details, its own motives, and its own doubts about what that single image truly revealed. Some pointed to a weathered diary discovered decades later in the dusty attic of the old Bates cottage. Its pages, warped and stained by salt air and winter rain, offered a starkly different account. The author, a cousin to one of the grooms, insisted the violence was not born of a lover's quarrel, but of a far older sin: debt. According to this version, Julian, the heir to a faltering estate, was buckling under the weight of his father's financial ruin. The confrontation with Ander, who owed him a staggering sum, was not about passion, but about desperation. The wedding, the diary claimed, was a deadline. That photograph, then, captured not a moment of unity, but the quiet, simmering tension of an impending schism. Others whispered of a souvenir box unearthed in a Madrid pawn shop in the 1950s. It was engraved with the initials JR, and inside lay a single damning artifact: a gentleman's handkerchief, folded and stiff with dried blood. This discovery fueled a more sinister theory.
Stay with me, because what comes next has been hidden for a very long time, and only a few people know the truth behind it.
That Julian had not vanished into grief, but had fled into the night, a fugitive from his own guilt. Yet another thread spoke of a secret pact, a desperate plan for escape. It was said that Inez and Ander, the star-crossed lovers at the heart of the storm, could not bear their forced separation and were planning to elope. The faintest indentation on her ring finger in the photograph, a pale ghost of a promise, was held up as proof, a symbol that their bond, though publicly severed, was a covenant they intended to honor. The stories grew wilder with time, taking on the quality of folklore. Sightings of the missing pair boarding a steamship bound for the Americas weeks after the tragedy. Cryptic letters, purportedly from Inez, arriving for years, her handwriting a trembling testament to a life lived in the shadows. With each new retelling, the line between truth and fiction blurred into mist. As Felix sifted through these contradictory fragments, he realized the enduring power of the photograph was not in the truth it held, but in the infinite questions it posed. It was never a record of a single moment. It was a mirror, reflecting the fears, the desires, and the unresolved sorrows of all who gazed upon it. A silent witness to the fact that the past is never truly past. It is merely the story we choose to tell ourselves. Its power resided not only in what it showed, but in what it refused to surrender. It was a secret, kept and created in its own retelling, a wound that could not scar over, a history that no single version could ever truly heal. And now, with new evidence unearthed in the sterile quiet of the studio, Felix felt the crushing weight of all those versions pressed down upon him. The time had come to confront what the photograph might finally prove, and what, perhaps, it was destined to conceal forever. The tension in the studio was a physical presence, thicker than the stale, recycled air. Felix Boschi prepared to re-enter the scanning zone, his mind a tangled knot of decades-old rumor and the soul-chilling certainty of what he had just glimpsed on the monitor. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to remember each version he had ever heard, each whispered lie and desperate truth. He met the gaze of the lead technician, a silent acknowledgement passing between them of the history that was at stake. From the control room, a nervous chatter crackled through the comms. The producer's voice cut through it, reading the final seconds, crisp and inexorable. 3, 2, 1, engage the scan. On the monitor, an image bloomed into existence. As the studio audience leaned forward in a single, unified motion, the technician began the final magnification, guided by Felix's precise instructions. The view moved, pixel by painstaking pixel, toward the intertwined hands of the fourth woman in the frame. And there, under the spectral glow of the ultraviolet light, a crest on a gold ring bearing the engraved letters A.M. flashed with unmistakable clarity. A wave of whispers rippled through the studio. Felix cleared his throat, his composure fraying at the edges. "That crest," he said, his voice low, addressing both the audience before him and the descendants who might be watching from half a world away, "belongs to the Munitis family. It was never registered among the family heirlooms." The implication was a silent thunderclap. The ring's presence on her hand, in a moment intended for another man, was a silent declaration. It was a love preserved in gold, but rejected by the world around them. At Felix's next command, the scan shifted, gliding across the image to the second man from the left. The audience watched as his face filled the screen, a mask of grief, his eyes fixed on a distant point far from the celebration. But this time, with the full force of maximum resolution and ultraviolet contrast, something else emerged from the grain. Faint contusions along the jawline. Felix Fee are not the random blemishes of an accident. They are the subtle cartography of violence. Violence, perhaps, from that very morning. His words were nearly drowned out by a sharp, collective gasp from the
Most people stop watching right here, but if you continue, you'll discover something almost no one knows.
control room. The host, ever the purveyor of spectacle, leaned in close. "What does this mean for the legend?" Felix hesitated, the weight of a century on his shoulders. Then he spoke, his voice a strange and haunting mixture of reverence and sorrow. "The legend," he began, "was never the truth. It was a shelter. We have looked at this image for generations, seeing a grand, romantic tragedy. We saw what we needed to see." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. But the truth was always there, hiding in the shadows between the silver halides. It was a story not of a noble, star-crossed love, but of something far more human. A story of coercion, of a secret kept under duress, of a love not just forbidden, but perhaps stolen. The photograph, once a symbol of an unsolvable mystery, had become something else entirely. It was no longer an artifact of a beautiful lie, but a silent, irrefutable witness to a painful truth. The photograph had not healed the wound, it had merely, after a century of silence, shown them where to find the knife. The history that everyone believed to be true had, it now seemed, only ever scratched the surface. A single photograph, once thought to immortalize a happy union, had in fact captured a moment of profound fracture, the quiet, devastating aftershock of a decision that would splinter families and give birth to a generation of whispers. The ring, and the faint, almost imperceptible bruises beneath it, were the final damning pieces of evidence. They confirmed that love and violence had met in this place, on that day, in that very moment. They proved that those who had long claimed to know the truth of what transpired had, in reality, only
If you think you've seen everything, wait, what comes next will turn everything upside down.
been guessing. For decades, family law had insisted that the ring vanished on the very same day that Anda died. This coincidence had fueled countless theories, chief among them that it was secretly gifted away in the final, desperate hours before the tragedy. But here it was, irrefutable and present. The air in the television studio grew thin, heavy with the weight of revelation. As the sheer scale of the disclosure settled upon everyone present, a profound silence fell. For a long, suspended moment, no one spoke. In the quiet, the director gave a frantic, unseen signal. The broadcast went black. The feed was cut, leaving a vast, stunned audience suspended in a state of profound uncertainty. 4 minutes, the story leaped from the television screen, migrating instantly to news feeds, text messages, and the hushed conversations over family dinner tables. The carefully constructed peace of the community had been shattered. Some descendants of the 5 men in the photograph called for calm, for prudence. Others, feeling the sting of a betrayal that spanned generations, demanded immediate answers. Old grievances, long buried under the weight of time and polite denial, were resurrected as if the ghosts from the group portrait had stepped out of the frame to walk among them once more. Local journalists descended upon the town archives, their frantic energy a stark contrast to the dusty silence of the records office. They began the painstaking work of comparing the family crest on the ring to faded church ledgers and brittle marriage certificates. The journey of the ring, from the possession of Ander Kruktins's family to its final, shocking appearance, became the subject of feverish, almost frantic speculation. Was it a final, secret promise? An act of rebellion? Or one of forgiveness? Letters and diaries were re-examined under harsh new light, but not a single one offered a complete account of what truly happened on the day those 5 men posed for their fateful group photograph. And as for Inez, the woman at the center of it all, her fate remains a ghost in the narrative. Some say she left town quietly after the wedding, vanishing into the anonymity of a larger world. Others believe she lived out her days with Julian, yet never once wore the ring that bound them. Whatever the truth, her silence became a crucial part of the legend, a blank space onto which an entire town projected its theories and its fears. The legal representatives of the Roa family, blindsided by the public accusation of violence and culpability, released a cautiously worded statement. "We respect the importance of historical inquiry," it read, "but we caution against drawing hasty conclusions based on partial evidence." Felix, meanwhile, published a thoughtful, measured article. The group photograph, he wrote, had always been a mirror for the community's hopes and its deepest anxieties. It was a cautionary tale, an enigma shaped by longing, by pride, and by profound loss. He urged the people of St. Helena to remember not only the wounds that had been reopened, but the powerful bonds of love and friendship that had once connected the figures in the frame. And so the story rests, not resolved, but irrevocably changed. The group photograph was no longer an artifact gathering dust in oblivion, but the living, breathing heart of a community's memory, forever altered, forever unresolved. For decades, a single photograph from the remote island of St. Helena held its silence. Within its silvered emulsion, a drama of lost love, jealousy, and betrayal lay dormant, waiting for a modern eye. With the simple act of magnification, a hidden world was brought into focus. A sudden, shocking clarity in one solitary frame that altered everything we thought we knew. The secrets it unlocked, the questions it posed, became a testament that history is not a story of settled answers. It is proof that the past can still astonish us, its quiet truths waiting patiently in the margins of a faded group portrait, ready to rewrite the entire narrative.